Syrian air defences reportedly shot down 8 missiles after a major airbase was struck early on Monday morning. That's according to Syrian state TV. They say the strikes near Homs were suspected to have been launched by the United States. However, a senior US official told Reuters there's no truth to reports of any American strikes against bases controlled by Syria's Bashar al-Assad. Syrian state TV said that a series of loud explosions were heard at the airfield as several suspected US missiles struck the installation in the country's west in the early hours of Monday morning local time. Monday's missile strike report follows an alleged chemical attack on the rebel-held region of eastern Ghouta by the Syrian military late Saturday. On Sunday, US President Donald Trump said on Twitter there would be a big price to pay for the alleged chemical attack in Ghouta, placing blame squarely at the feet of the Syrian and Russian governments. Early Monday morning, US government sources told Reuters an assessment of what happened in Ghouta showed that chemical weapons had been used. Medical aid groups said dozens were killed by poison gas in the attack. The source said the US was still assessing further details of the attack, but that their determination of the use of chemical weapons had been made with some degree of confidence. The European Union also said earlier that evidence pointed to Syrian state forces being responsible for the attack. The Syrian government has denied involvement.
And now, with round-the-clock updates from Reuters journalists, here are today's top stories.
The U.S. and North Korea may be in secret contact.
We may be looking at retaliation for the chemical attack in Syria.
Jurors will hear a whole lot more in Bill Cosby's sexual assault retrial.
This is Reuters Now.
Washington and Pyongyang have secretly been in touch, and apparently it's bringing in results. For the first time, North Korea has told the U.S. it's willing to discuss denuclearization when Kim Jong-un meets with Donald Trump at a potential summit. That's according to a U.S. official who says the contacts happened through 2 different channels. Officials from both sides spoke through the U.S. mission at the United Nations headquarters and a separate back channel for intelligence officers. Up to this point, Washington had mostly been relying on South Korea as a middleman. The U.S. official didn't confirm how long the secret channels have been open, but did say that multiple contacts have been held and that the Kim-Trump summit is slated for May. There are already several stumbling blocks ahead of those talks. The biggest one, denuclearizing, might mean very different things for Washington and Pyongyang. The U.S. sees it as North Korea abandoning its nuclear weapons program, while Pyongyang has said in the past it'll consider giving that up if the U.S. withdraws from the Korean peninsula for the first time since the Korean War. For years, Washington has insisted any summit like that must be preceded by North Korean steps to denuclearize, and some analysts say Trump's willingness to meet with Kim has handed Pyongyang a diplomatic win.
Russia's defense ministry says that Israeli warplanes were behind the strike on a Syrian airfield that followed Saturday's suspected chemical weapons attack. Syrian soldiers seen here. A spokesperson for Israel has declined to comment, but Russia says the planes carried it out from Lebanese airspace. It's unclear exactly how many missiles were launched at the military base. Moscow says Israel fired 8 and that 5 were intercepted by Syrian defenses. Syria's state-run media said that there were several killed and wounded, but pointed the finger at the United States as the attacker. Washington's denied it, as has NATO ally France, without offering their own explanations. The airstrike happened hours after President Trump had warned of a, quote, big price to pay for the Syrian government after reports of another alleged chemical attack by Syria's military surfaced over the weekend. Reuters couldn't verify the reports, but aid organizations said dozens died in the rebel enclave of Ghouta, men, women, and children. Syria's government has denied any involvement. Russia said any retaliation would be based on fabricated excuses.
An alleged gas attack against rebel-held land in Syria on Sunday elicited a fierce response from U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump taking the rare step of directly criticizing Russian President Vladimir Putin for the incident, while referring to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad as Animal Assad, and warning the 2 allies that there will be a big price to pay for the attack. Reuters correspondent David Shepardson.
It seems like the most likely direct response would be another missile strike. Certainly, the administration has a lot of potential targets and could be much broader than what it opted to attack last year.
Last year, Trump authorized a cruise missile strike on a Syrian airbase days after a sarin gas attack on civilians. Tom Bossert, Trump's Homeland Security and Counterterrorism advisor, told ABC's This Week the White House would not rule out launching another missile attack, but diplomatic talks may also be on the table. The alleged chemical attack comes after Trump last week said he wanted to bring home the 2,000 U.S. troops on the ground in Syria.
Remember, President Trump entered office wanting to withdraw from many of the foreign conflicts the U.S. has long been involved in. So they've never taken talks with Syria off the table. And the fact that he publicly was talking about withdrawing troops suggests that there may be some appetite on the part of the administration to find some other solution. But it's clear today that the administration is sending a signal, both of the UN and the president himself, that there is going to be some U.S. response.
Trump had previously scheduled a meeting at the White House on Monday with senior military leaders. New National Security Advisor John Bolton, a hard-charging former UN ambassador, officially begins on Monday. Last year, Bolton praised Trump's missile response to Syria.
After a week of tensions over a possible trade war with China that rocked global markets, with Washington and Beijing threatening each other with billions of dollars in tariffs, U.S. President Donald Trump on Sunday suddenly turned down the heat, tweeting, "President Xi and I will always be friends, no matter what happens with our dispute on trade. China will take down its trade barriers because it is the right thing to do. Taxes will become reciprocal and a deal will be made on intellectual property. Great future for both countries." Reuters political editor Karen Bowen is covering the story.
Well, Trump is clearly watching the market reaction, and I think the message that he's trying to send to the markets with his tweets this morning is, we're going to get what we want out of China. This is just a negotiating position. The idea that there could be concessions doesn't seem to be based on actual talks that are going on.
Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin also seemed eager to soothe concerns on a Sunday appearance on Face the Nation.
Our expectation is that we don't think there will be a trade war.
The U.S. accuses China of unfair trade practices that have resulted in a massive trade deficit and also of large-scale intellectual property theft. Washington on Tuesday unveiled some $50 billion worth of proposed tariffs on Chinese imports. China then matched Trump's $50 billion with a hit list of its own. Trump on Thursday then doubled down, proposing $100 billion more in Chinese import duties. China responded by saying it was prepared to launch a, quote, fierce counterstrike.
After a hero's welcome in the United States, Saudi Arabia's crown prince is facing a tougher crowd in France. Major deals were signed and Hollywood rolled out the red carpet for Mohammed bin Salman. But as he arrives in Paris, thorny issues like Iran and the war in Yemen have taken precedent over the pomp. The French-Saudi relationship is more strained under President Emmanuel Macron. For example, a tourism project between the two countries will be announced. But the Crown Prince is not expected to clinch any mega deals like we saw in the US or Britain. French officials dismiss this as a sign of a weakening relationship, saying instead that they're seeking a new method of working with Riyadh that doesn't depend on eye-catching new partnerships. There are other conflict points. The 32-year-old prince has emphasised closer ties with Donald Trump, at the same time as Macron has tried to improve relations with Saudi's arch-enemy Iran. Trump has said he's considering scrapping the Iran nuclear deal, while Macron has vowed to preserve it. The visit also coincides with pressure at home for Macron to suspend French arms sales to the Saudi-led coalition fighting Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. While it'll be all smiles in public, it'll likely be tough talking in private.
It's take two for Bill Cosby as he faces a new jury in his sexual assault retrial. The 1980s TV dad, who fell from grace after more than 50 women publicly accused him of sex crimes, will once again face off in court against Andrea Constand. She says Cosby drugged and assaulted her at his home sometime between December 2003 and January 2004.
Mr. Cosby maintains that he's innocent of these charges.
Cosby's first trial ended in a hung jury last summer, but this jury will hear testimony the first one never did. Reuters correspondent Barbara Goldberg is following the case.
One of the biggest differences this time around is that the judge has allowed 5 other women who accuse Cosby of similar attacks on them, drugging them, sexually assaulting them. They're going to be allowed to testify.
The highly unusual exception comes after the judge ruled that the multiple accusations were so similar, they show a pattern the jury should be allowed to hear. It's a win for the prosecution, but the defense got a favorable ruling as well. It's allowed to call a witness in an attempt to undermine Constand's credibility. And a new defense attorney has joined Cosby's legal team. He comes with experience. Tom Mesereau successfully defended Michael Jackson against child molestation charges. While some of the players in the courtroom have changed, so has the national discourse on sexual assaults. The second trial begins in the wake of the Me Too movement and a series of high-powered men brought to accountability.
You're up to date. For more, download the Reuters TV app on your mobile or streaming device.